On the edge of Bristol's vibrant city centre, a formidable Victorian structure casts a long shadow. His Majesty's Prison Bristol, a Grade II listed building, has stood here for over 170 years. Its high, imposing walls, built from dark pennant sandstone, separate it from the rhythm of the modern world, a silent monument to a different era of justice. From the outside, it appears quiet, almost dormant. The thick stone muffles the sounds within, presenting a facade of order and containment. But this monolithic stillness is deceptive. For decades, the story inside these walls has been one of turmoil, neglect, and a system straining at the seams. Inside, it has faced years of serious, sustained, and often damning criticism from the very bodies tasked with overseeing its function. It is a story that raises fundamental questions about the purpose of incarceration and the state of Britain's prison estate. Opened in 1847, the prison was built for a different era, conceived in a time when the prevailing penal philosophy was one of separation and silence. It was designed to hold prisoners in isolation, to encourage penitence through solitude. The architecture itself was a tool of punishment. But today, its Victorian design works directly against the modern requirements of safety, rehabilitation, and basic human dignity. The narrow landings, the labyrinthine corridors, and the sheer verticality of the wings create blind spots, hinder supervision, and foster an environment where control is difficult to maintain. The building's very bones are a liability. Cells designed for a single occupant in the 19th century are now routinely doubled up. These spaces are small, claustrophobic, offering little more than a bed and a toilet with no privacy screen. For up to 23 hours a day, this is the entirety of a prisoner's world. The facilities are outdated. The infrastructure, from the plumbing to the electrical wiring, is a patchwork of repairs and failing systems, a constant battle against decay. This is not just an issue of comfort, it is a fundamental issue of decency. And overcrowding remains a constant corrosive issue. HMP Bristol is a local prison, serving the courts of the region. It holds a complex mix of remand and sentenced prisoners, creating a transient and often volatile population. When the number of inmates consistently exceeds the prison's certified normal accommodation, every single resource is stretched thinner. For years, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons has repeatedly raised the alarm. Their reports, published for all to see, paint a consistent and troubling picture. They are not merely suggestions, they are urgent warnings about a public institution failing in its duty of care. In this environment, violence increased. Assaults, both between prisoners and against staff, became alarmingly common. The cramped conditions, the lack of purposeful activity, and the pervasive sense of hopelessness created a tinderbox. Minor disputes could escalate into serious violence with terrifying speed. Alongside the violence, drug use became widespread. The availability of illicit substances, particularly psychoactive drugs like spice, destabilized the prison further. They fueled debt, bullying, and unpredictable behavior, making the prison wings even more dangerous and difficult to manage. Compounding every other problem, chronic staff shortages affected safety. A national crisis in prison officer recruitment and retention hit Bristol hard. Too often, there was simply not enough staff to safely unlock prisoners for education, work, or even showers. This lack of manpower meant a reactive rather than proactive approach to security, with officers moving from one crisis to the next. As a result of these converging pressures, basic living conditions deteriorated to a point that shocked inspectors. The fabric of the building was failing, and the capacity to maintain it was overwhelmed. Inspection reports from the period described cells that were simply filthy, with accumulated dirt and unclean toilets. They documented a level of squalor deemed unacceptable in any setting, let alone one run by the state. Broken furniture was commonplace. Cell call bells, a vital lifeline in an emergency, were often found to be non-functional. These were not just signs of neglect, but critical safety failures. Poor sanitation was a recurring theme, with blocked toilets and leaking pipes left unrepaired for extended periods, creating deeply unhygienic and degrading living conditions for prisoners and a foul working environment for staff. These were not isolated incidents, but symptoms of systemic maintenance failures. The backlog of repair jobs grew, leaving essential parts of the prison environment broken and hazardous. In this chaotic environment, healthcare services struggled to cope. The sheer demand, coupled with the challenges of operating within a failing prison, meant that providing even basic medical care became a daily struggle. Appointments were missed, and the needs of a vulnerable population were not being adequately met. Mental health support, a critical service in any prison, was stretched perilously thin. The number of prisoners with complex mental health needs far outstripped the available resources, leaving many individuals isolated and without the specialist care they required. Inevitably, the levels of self-harm and despair began to climb. The number of incidents became a stark statistical measure of the suffering within the walls, placing the prison under intense and unavoidable scrutiny. The situation had become untenable. In response to the escalating crisis and the threat of direct government intervention, a series of urgent improvement plans were introduced. The prison leadership, under immense pressure, was forced to act. A major drive to increase staff recruitment was launched. New officers were brought in, and efforts were made to improve retention, aiming to restore the basic levels of supervision and control that had been lost. Significant investment was directed towards refurbishing the worst of the living areas. Wings were deep cleaned, cells were repainted, and broken furniture was replaced in an attempt to restore a sense of order and decency. Security measures were tightened. New technology was installed to better detect drugs and other contraband, and strategies were implemented to try and break the cycle of debt and violence that had taken hold. Despite these concerted efforts, deep-seated challenges remain. The improvements, while welcome, are a constant battle against the prison's fundamental limitations. The building itself has not changed. The population pressures have not disappeared. The story of HMP Bristol highlights the profound and inherent risks of relying on an aging and decaying prison estate. It demonstrates a difficult truth, that there is a point where a building is no longer fit for purpose, no matter how dedicated the staff or how ambitious the improvement plan. It is a case study in what happens when chronic overcrowding meets systemic neglect. The two forces create a toxic synergy, eroding safety, purpose, and hope. In such conditions, control becomes fragile. Order is not a given. It is a daily, precarious achievement. The line between stability and chaos becomes dangerously thin. And when that line is crossed, the system itself begins to fail. It fails the prisoners it holds, it fails the staff who work there, and it fails the public it is meant to protect. Subscribe to Unknown Record and check out the full prison series on the channel.